Welcome to Introduction to AI for Campaigns. This is a session from Arena, but we are excited to bring back Ben Resnick, who you are going to hear from in a second, and I will let him introduce himself. If we haven't met yet, I am Jess Weldon. I am the Director of Training Programs at Arena, and we are excited to let you know that we have joined the Zinc Collective. So on the next slide, we will see the Zinc Collective is a organization that is a collection of organizations. We have some sister orgs in DigiDems, and we're excited to work alongside them. And we also have some other colleagues who are working on other initiatives across the space. Our focus is recruiting, developing, and retaining and deploying exceptional talent. And this fits very well with Arena's mission, which is on the next slide, which is to convene, train, and support the next generation of leaders. So that is what we are all here to do today. And I will kick it over to Ben. Can you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what we're going to be covering in this session?
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, y'all. Really excited to be doing this training with everyone today. My name is Ben Resnick. I am currently Chief Strategy Officer of Social Current, which is one of the leading influencer marketing agencies and strategy firms in the space. I've been working at the intersection of politics and tech for well over a decade at this point. I am also a Zinc Collective alum. I was Deputy Director of Tech Strategy, helping lead their AI work in the 23-24 cycle. And I wrote a document called the Quick Start AI Guidelines for Democratic Campaigns. Also, for the record, I have a 2-month-old newborn, and my favorite kitchen utensil at the moment is a bottle warmer slash sterilizer. Those are magic. Highly recommend. Um, so, with that, we have a bunch of ground to cover today. A lot of it is going to be establishing sort of a common baseline of knowledge. And then I think the most exciting piece of this day is going to be an opportunity for the folks on this call to sort of speak together about the ways that they are exploring this technology for good and bad. So we're doing intros. We're going to talk about sort of basics. What is this thing? What is generative AI? How should I think about it? What is it good at? What is it not good at, conceptually, and beginning to apply that to your workflow as political campaign and advocacy professionals. Lots of fun discussions with your colleagues who are in departments. There's going to be a quick poll in a minute about what department you're in. And we will be sorting folks by department, not by level of AI experience. And our hope there is that folks with different degrees of comfort and experience can sort of interact across levels of seniority and sort of discover how folks are solving problems already for themselves across orgs. After we come back, after that, we'll have a quick break. We'll come back and we'll talk about the risks and opportunities that are here now that we've sort of established what this tech is and how it can be helpful in general. The question becomes, how do we do it right and make sure that the benefits outweigh the risks? We'll have some more time to explore how to make this work for your own life and workflow again together, and then we'll wrap up. So that's the ball game. And as I alluded to, a big part of the fun here is going to be chatting with your colleagues. There are three major elements here that are sort of overall. Oh, Jess, I see your hand is raised.
Yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I forgot a main piece of my job was to let people know that we have a handout for you to follow along
Mm.
as we're going through. The slides are in a PDF for you as well, and you can reference them later, so you don't need to worry about taking extreme notes. And we're going to send you a follow-up email, which will include the recording too. The last housekeeping note is as you have questions going through this deck, please use the Q&A function in Zoom, which you can find if it's not available to you right now. You can click on the three dots that say more and check out the Q&A function, and you can give a little thumbs up to people's questions that you like so that we can know which questions we should answer first. Okay, that's my housekeeping spiel. I will pass it back to Ben.
Yay! Thank you for housekeeping. So yes, let's frame up what we are trying to do here more in more detail. AI, generative AI, very big topic. How it applies and doesn't to our space is also super broad. So I'm going to try to focus in sort of three main, very practical verticals. One, like the frame here is which of my tasks could AI address efficiently. I think the big picture is like where does this fit? Not only listing out individual tasks, but like understanding the themes of like what it means for a task or a need to make sense with AI as part of the solution. Second, risks and guardrails. We will dig into that, and we've got some really useful resources there. And three, what do I iterate or expand on? And I sort of think of that in two ways. We will in a moment do a quick exercise about like iteration and improving your own outputs with AI. But I think bigger picture, it is about iterating and growing as your understanding of the technology and the technology itself continues to iterate and grow. So this is absolutely the beginning of this conversation with yourself in your heart and also with your colleagues. So with that, I think, yes, okay. So I believe we're about to do a quick Zoom poll department breakdown. It should have just popped up on your screen. Yes, the answers are starting to flow up to 20%, 25. Excellent. I want to see participation that is better than your average presidential election year. We can do it. 63, 67. Pretty interesting, like mix and balance here. Um, I'm seeing many of the major departments quite well represented in here. Definitely makes sense. We've got um, a lot of comms folks, um, finance, campaign management, and the good news is you've got plenty of colleagues in here to discuss. I'm going to, oh, looks like we just wrapped. I'm going to hit the share results button. Yay. Hopefully everybody can see that. As you can see, oh, we got to 100%. That's so exciting. Go us. Um, yeah, really good mix of departments in here. So really excited to sort of break down what all of this means practically for folks. With that, I am going to dive in. Okay, so now that we've done that poll, we get to do another poll. So first, we just sort of want to understand everybody's baseline experience level with generative AI. I believe in the pre-work materials um, we asked your comfort with it. Difference between comfort and experience. So go ahead and select this QR code on your phone, or go to slido.com and enter this code, and you will have the option to fill this out. You can see in the upper right, people are appearing. Going to give this another minute. Thank you for doing all of this data gathering discovery with us at the beginning of the call. Hopefully, that is going to help contextualize all of the work. And I really want to see the results, but as soon as I click onto the next slide, it will close the poll. So we are going to give it about 30 more seconds to allow folks to jump in. And I'm going to continue to allow the tension to build. And in the meantime, I'm going to think about my favorite non-baby kitchen gadget. Um, Tongs are really underrated. I love a good tong. Being able to turn stuff over without poking it is great. Okay. We're up to 87. I'm going to give it a 10-second countdown. 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right. Yes. Okay, cool. So let's check out the breakdown. This all makes sense. Use it sometimes. It looks like folks are generally quite, oh, hey, look, the results are still coming in. That's great. Um, folks are generally like pretty solidly experienced, which is one, great, and two, I think many folks who have played with AI don't realize the extent to which it is really very new still for the general public. Most, I think something like 80%, I just read the stat earlier this week, 80% of Americans, I believe, are using less than 1,000 tokens a month, which is like essentially the equivalent of a couple of sentences. So using it using it this way is puts a lot of y'all ahead of the curve, even the folks who are only using it, a handful of times. So now that we've done all this contextualization, we've talked about experience level, we've talked about what we're going to talk about. Let's actually talk. Um, First, uh, sort of deceptively challenging question. Um, what is this thing? What is generative AI? I'm really curious how folks sort of think about this themselves. So I would love to invite you in the chat in a sentence. What do you think generative AI is? How would you describe it to, your grandmother based on your experience using it so far? Computer tells me things I argue. Clippy with a bachelor's degree, deregulated threat to our society. All right. Um, all right. We're okay. So I want to sort of contextualize what this is. Computer model program goes off prompts you type is actually quite close to what I'm going to say. Um, generative AI at its core is a plausibility machine. That's how I think about it. It is a system that absorbs an incredible amount of data, and we'll talk about the ethics of that later. Um, Finds patterns in that data, and then uses the patterns in the data that it has to uh, output something that seems like it would match the patterns that it has already gathered. Um, that is a incredibly broad idea. Like if you have basically the entire internet's worth of data, there's patterns everywhere for good and bad. Um, but that also means that it can be very easy for it to, there's always going to be a pattern to be found, whether or not that pattern is real or not. And it is going to output exactly what it says is the likeliest pattern with exactly the same degree of confidence if it's actually a very weak signal or a very strong one. So that's why I use the term plausibility machine. It is not giving you an answer that is grounded in truth or an understanding of the world or anything like that. AI doesn't think. Let me repeat that again for emphasis. AI does not think. There is no resemblance between this technology and human cognition. Um, the output is based on basically numbers and patterns. The good news is there are a lot of situations where patterns is a really strong sort of foundation to get questions answered, especially under certain circumstances and contexts that we'll talk about in a minute. Um, but the critical takeaway here is there are two pieces. One, there is a difference between plausible and true. And two, you will be surprised at how often plausible is good enough, and good enough is good enough for what we are trying to do in our day-to-day lives. Um, Quick run through of sort of the world, the space we're operating in. I have a feeling that everybody has heard of these main AI tools. All of these function basically the same way. They are giant corporations that have given you essentially a chatbot that connects to the internet. A couple of things here. One, at the end of the day, all of these have like strengths and weaknesses, things they're better at than others. For a long time, ChatGPT was the coding tool. That's less of a thing now. Um, for a while, Claude has, I've often found it to be a more effective writer on a first draft. But like at the end of the day, they all sort of converge and are more or less the same thing. So the question of like what AI tool to use in general is, it's more a question of what is the best for your organization, and what your organization has decided to go with, rather than um, rather than any like magical tool being better than the rest. They are constantly at roughly the same level. Um, Also, there's been some really important developments in the past couple of years that are worth pulling out and into the conversation. AI, let me see. I think ChatGPT launched in November of 2022. Um, and there has been a lot of development since, for example, Zen Collective put out our initial guidance on how to use technologies. And I want to pull out three that are really important. One is the introduction of a concept called a reasoning model. It used to be when ChatGPT first came out, for example, and it was blowing everybody's mind, that the way the system would work is you ask a question, the question gets inputted directly into the pattern matching machine, and you get an output. That would mean that exactly the way that you framed the question, exactly the order of things, exactly the question that you asked, etc., um, would really directly affect the output and the quality of the output. If you were on LinkedIn during this era, you probably remember the really annoying posts that were like, "These are the 10 secret prompts that will, unlock your, quality of whatever." This was the era when there was research saying if you included in a prompt, I'll give you $300 if you answer this question right, you would actually get a measurably higher quality output. That is essentially because the input was stuck raw into the system and you get the output. What has changed is there is a new layer. This is the core of what a reasoning model is. Essentially, instead of your input getting stuck directly into the pattern matching machine, there is a new layer where essentially the system is um, parsing and interpreting what you are trying to say. Um, for example, like let's use image generation as an example, not because I recommend that usage, but because it's clear. In the olden days, by which I mean like, 2 years ago, if you were to request an image, it would give you back essentially exactly what you asked for, and either weird random stuff alongside it or kind of nothing at all, right? If you asked it for a picture of a cat, you might get a cat floating in space, or you might get a cat surrounded by like weird Dadaist nightmare, right? Um, with a reasoning model, it is able to um, do some sort of filling in of the gaps that are implied in your request. For example, you probably don't want a cat that is floating in space. Maybe it sits on a place where cats usually go, like a windowsill, right? Maybe it is next to a dog. It is probably not next to a space alien, right? All of this holds with other sort of more complex thinking requests, right? If you are asking it for research on a recent news event, it is going to imply, or you are implying that you want it from a source that is in the past couple of days and not something that is from 10 years ago. That is from perhaps a local news source. These are things that you used to have to say, but are much more implicit now, for better or worse. Um, the second major development, oh, and sorry, I should say all of the examples that I flagged a second ago, all of these have reasoning models built in. This is now the common standard for like the quote unquote frontier models, the most advanced commercial models. The second is the development of AI agents, and this is also sort of a hot button issue. Generative AI has developed from being just sort of a chat bot to, in theory, being able to go do things. The idea of generative AI going and doing things, that is an agent. The concept of the going and the doing. And there are ways that this can be incredibly powerful. For example, you can ask it to, you know, let's say consolidate the latest local news that's relevant to your candidate, and it's going to break that down into tasks like, identify developments that are relevant to your candidate, go to different news sources, read the articles, summarize them, and report them back, things like that. It's also famously something you can use for coding. It is really powerful, but for the exact same reasons, it is really, really dangerous if you do not set proper bounds. By which I mean, uh, uh, if you give it too much permission, it's going to there's a risk that it can actually mess with your system and blow something up. Finally, there's been a lot of tools development of this tech. Here's a handful of tools that are either based on AI or use it. Um, this is an overwhelming amount of information, which is sort of the point. So that's why it is so important to understand what your needs are and what is directly relevant. With that, it just happened. Just clicked on. Oh yeah, I'm sorry. I clicked on. Well, I accidentally went to the Higher Ground Labs page. So let's let me stop. You don't have to listen to me anymore. And let's actually go give this a try just to sort of get an understanding. Go ahead and go to one of these tools. Gemini, Claude.ai, ChatGPT, or bot. Someone mentioned DeepSeek earlier. That's a complex question. And uh, go ahead to that bot and let's just ask it a question, a really general one, okay? Ask AI to do a simple task for you. And let me be clear, do not use company data when you are doing this. Do not do something that is like private to your campaign if you're using this tool in this moment. And I'll explain more about that later. So yeah, don't overthink this. What is a thing that is top of mind for you? I would love it if folks would just like post the exact prompt that they are putting in into the chat. I just want to see what people are putting together. And I'd also love to love it. Press release announcing my run for president. I'd also love to get folks' thoughts on like how it was, right? How does the quality feel? This is what's known as a zero shot prompt. You are giving it no additional context or anything like that. You're saying just go do the thing. How many turtles are there in the world? Love it. These are really good. I love it. Tasty protein meal recipe, upcoming primaries, creative hobby. This is great. And how are folks feeling? Purely a vibes check on the quality of the responses. Not bad. Yeah, I think that that's about right, generally. Didn't like the answer. Vague question is vague answer. That's exactly Myra, slip you $20. That's exactly the frame that I want. Um, yeah, if you ask a general question, you're probably going to get a general answer back. And that is because, getting back to what I said earlier, it's all about pattern recognition, right? So if you have too broad a data set, it's going to give you too broad an answer. So a big part of using generative AI is understanding how to ask questions, right? And we'll talk more about sort of the nature of what questions, what outputs are better and worse. Um, uh, so let's talk about how to improve the quality. The act of making a request of a generative AI tool is known as a prompt. Um, there are a lot of things that you can do to improve the quality of a prompt. And this, I think, is something that can be helpful for learning how to interact with these tools. So just a few. And if I remember correctly, I think that there's some material like this in the worksheet. So you don't have to write all of this down, but the bottom line is all of these, whether it's the role, the task, the audience, the format is all about sort of narrowing down the set of information that this plausibility machine is basing its information on. So something as simple as a Facebook post, right? There are one sentence Facebook posts. There's vague booking, that's a paragraph. There's giant multi-paragraph screeds, right? So it's important to, in a prompt, say, for example, write a post for this, a Facebook post for this, for an audience of primarily young women for an event coming up this weekend. Things like that. The more detail you can give, the better. So let's take a moment. Oh yeah, a couple of other things you can. A lot of these tools have quote unquote memory these days, where it understands sort of context persistently that you give it. You can ask the bot to ask you questions, and you can give feedback on the output. So looking at the prompt that you just gave, let's go ahead and improve it. So using these ideas. Which again are in that link that just shared, go ahead and try to give it a more detailed version of the prompt and see how the quality improves or doesn't. I noted, Sean, the thing that you just posted, who's raised the most money for Maine state Senate races in the 26th campaign cycle. This is a fantastic, as folks do this, and people please, again, post your questions and how you feel about the results here in the chat. Maine state Senate races in 26. This is critical because there is basically one data source for the answer to Sean's question, and that is Maine's Department of Elections. If that information is available online and accessible, if it is recent and accurate, that is one thing. But if you have to, email the Department of Elections and get back a CSV, the system is not going to be able to get you a good output. But that doesn't mean it's not going to try, and it might end up giving you, pretty bad stuff. So, is ChatGPT an agent? Yeah, please put that in the Q&A, and I'll cover that later. Long story short is like it has agent abilities. And yeah, again, Q&A would be great. But we have all of the models I flagged earlier have agencies. So yeah, anybody done an improved prompt and gotten a response? Anybody want to share? You can. Yeah, Sarah, that's a really good one. There's a couple of things I want to flag about that. First, it's using, sorry, the one that that I'm showing is, can you decode handwriting on these nomination signatures? Use the same columns, highlight rows where you're unsure, and put in an Excel sheet. There's a bunch of elements that I think are useful here. There's sequence in there. What are the steps you should do in what order? The specific task in the specific order. What is the format? Multi-columns. Context. You have flagged these are petition nomination signatures. That's helpful. Also, this highlights a strength. Most modern models, Claude, ChatGPT, Gemini, are what's known as multimodal, which just means they can take different forms of input, not just written text, but pictures, video, things like that. That's where you really get into the sort of complexity and the highest value and also highest risk of some of these tools. Yeah, could pull the data available on the state site. Um, yeah. Sean, your challenge with Maine definitely makes sense. All right, so I'm going to move on. The bottom line here is working with generative AI is a constant system of iteration, and one of the most important things is understanding what you are trying to accomplish and that context. Now, it's all well and good for asking a random question, but this is generative AI 101 for campaigns, right? So how is this actually useful to your life? And the good and bad thing about generative AI, it is so broad and generalizable that it can in theory give response to anything. So what are the places where it is actually useful. Um, there is a helpful a way of thinking about this that I have found helpful, especially when you are doing it your first time, first series of times, and that is to think about what in your life, in your workflow, in your campaigns organization is the most mechanical. What is the time? What is the thing that is taking a lot of time but not a lot of thought? The classic example for me is how much work is copying and pasting data from one spreadsheet to another, right? Or if you have to take um, a fundraising email and make a bunch of little tweaks for different demographics or stuff like that. These are cases where it can take a lot of time, but not a lot of like strategic input is necessary. That is the place where these technologies can be the most valuable as long as you're helpful. Basically, if you were to ask yourself the question, if I could wave a magic wand and solve one problem in my work, the questions are: one, what of those problems are suited to the type of technology that we have been discussing? And two, if you magically did solve that problem, what would you be doing with that time instead? And that's a really critical piece here. That's sort of about really to me what generative AI is for. And we'll talk about that later. It is freeing up the day to day time of yourself, of your volunteers, of your staff to do the things that only humans can do best. And that is all about relationships. It is all about empathy. It is all about strategy. Um, Not, and I cannot emphasize this enough, just because ChatGPT can write a half decent fundraising email doesn't mean that you should fire your finance team or your communication team. The question is, what are all the things in the middle of their to-do list that in theory they can finally do now if we have good outputs and good guardrails for them. So we're gonna sort of this is the beginning of our discussion point. So I want folks to think in their daily lives. We talked about department. What are the tasks in your work life that meet these definitions? What is really time consuming? What is repetitive, something you have to do every day, multiple times a day in the same way? What's mechanical? And also tasks where you get stuck, where you're dealing with the tyranny of the blank page. I'd love if folks could start posting any answers they have to this in the chat. Here are a few ideas. I'll go back to this in a second, but we're actually going to spend about 5 minutes thinking through this as a team, excuse me, we're thinking this individually, and then we are going to break into groups by department and discuss this more. So um, here's the full thing. What are these mechanistic tasks? Of those, what are all the tasks you do? Of those, which of those are best suited to AI? By which I mean, again, repetitive, mechanistic, etc. And if it could be solved, what would be the most valuable to your life? I'm seeing searching for templates and best practices. I'm seeing checking and sifting through emails. Let's take about 5 minutes. Actually, Deborah, can you confirm, should we do 5 minutes here or should we cut it any shorter?
We could cut it a little bit shorter. I think
Okay,
just
let's
when
do
people are ready to go into the
cool.
breakout room, do you want to just go to the slide that says what the breakout discussion is? And then when people are ready, they can just kind of put a plus in the chat.
Yeah, absolutely. So after you have thought through this for yourself and your individual workflows, we're going to break into groups and we're going to talk about the themes and the commonalities that we have found. So these are the things we're gonna discuss together. What do you do? To which of these might AI be suited? How might AI be used to address these tasks? And I want to flag that you should have you should identify problems for which AI is a viable solution, not take AI and start looking for problems, right? The point of this tech is not that it's cool, it's that it can help us do advocacy work. What questions are coming up as you explore these things? And if you could snap your fingers and make this solve the problem. What would you do with that time? What would that allow you to do? So let's take 1 or 2 more minutes. No need to share, but if you do have something that you know you're going to be talking about when we break out, go ahead and share it in the chat. I'm really curious to see what people start discussing. Ooh, looking at Nora's very cool workflow, tracking social media posts, and you built a scraper. Nora built a scraper, probably something that I know that's something that I don't know how to do, but it is something that is relatively simple, technically speaking, and that a system can do. Scanning and breaking state legislative campaign finance filings, updating spreadsheets for sure. Cool. Okay, let's go ahead and move into the breakout groups. Jess, do you want to start setting up the
Yeah.
breakouts?
So we think that this will be most impactful if y'all talk amongst people who are in similar roles or in a similar department. And we hope that you will be able to both share ideas and get ideas in these breakouts. So please don't leave. Please stay for the breakouts. You can join a breakout room by clicking on the three dots that say more, and then you can open up the breakout panel. It looks like a little window pane, and then you'll be able to select the breakout room that has a name of a department. So you can do that now, and if you need help, you can just stay in here and we will help move you to the right room. So go ahead and select the room that matches the department that you would like to talk about. And we'll have
largest concentrations of Muslim voters are. So I just wanted to share that as a challenge that we're struggling with and are revisiting what we use AI for.
Good flag. Haley, I see your hand is up.
That's actually piggybacking off of Mare. Excuse me if I'm mispronouncing your name, darling. That's exactly what our group was coming out of that conversation talking about. Is the worry of putting all of this information into the chat bots. Like I was just saying, I came out of the DNC training in Phoenix just a couple weeks ago, and we had this major conversation about the level of information that we are giving to the chatbots and what we're telling them. And there is this level of worry about that. And so just being cautious, um, like what is the protocol?
Yeah,
Yeah, I
that's
don't
a
have the
really
answers to
like
that. So
that's something that we discussed in the organizing group as well. I am not surprised that this is a theme. We will be discussing privacy, security, policy right on the other side of the break. So good questions at a good moment. The thing that I will say for now, if you remember one thing coming out of this in terms of privacy and security, it is that if you are not paying for the product, you are the product, just like social media. Every single one of these models has a free version that you can ask questions and stuff like that. You know why it's free? It's not because they're nice. It's because they are using your data to train the next generation of their models. And that means if you are putting private information, proprietary polling, contact information of various donors into a free system, that means that it is sucking up that information and could very well spit it out at random to some random user at some random point in the future. So that is an important takeaway. Any other themes? I'm going to give it about 2 more minutes here uh, to surface any themes, anything else that people were seeing come up a lot in their group about what their day to day looks like, about what sorts of problems in their role or department seem like the best fit for this technology or not.
Sure. One of the things we talked about is that AI is really good for organizing. So, for example, if you're doing polling or you're asking them hypothetical questions and you're not using, your personal campaign data or, the finance data, and people have found that that's been very helpful to strategize based on some of the AI parameters and predictions.
Yeah, that's a really cool one. One of the things that this tech is really good at is solving what I call the tyranny of the blank page. If you're in comms, you know that feeling very well. And being able to do that sort of conversational back and forth can be really helpful for thinking through complex things, even if it's basically reflecting your own thinking back to you. Still a helpful thing. Um, is there a Gary with his hand raised?
Gary put a good comment in the chat about the ops discussion around chasing receipts.
Yeah, thank you so much. So me and my group, we come from operations and we talked about how much of our day is chasing receipts and tracking some of the little tasks that we do on a day-to-day basis. And we were just kind of like trying to figure out how we could streamline that. And Tanesh, he kind of showed us a good kind of workflow for us to do that using ChatGPT and maybe using some agents from Claude.
That's really cool. I would love to see that, or maybe we'll have the opportunity to share that with the group um, later. I see we are right at 3. So, in the interest of, I could do this for like 2 more hours, but they won't let me do that. So, we are going to uh, have a Q&A at the end. We're moving this and take a quick, Jess, are we doing literally 5 minutes here?
Yeah,
5 minute break.
take a
Okay.
5-minute break and we'll be back. What are questions you'd like to explore in our remaining 50 minutes together? Let us know. Ben, it's all you.
All right, let's dig in. Yeah, if there's stuff that folks feel particularly jazzed or excited about, please feel free to drop it in the chat. Also, we do have that Q&A box. We're going to reserve some time at the end to do a Q&A. As Jess was saying, that's the fun stuff. On that note, we're going to dive into some of the meatiest content here, something that I know that a lot of people are thinking about a lot, and that is both risks and opportunities. This technology is a double-edged sword. So how do you use this technology not only effectively but ethically, so that we are not going 2 steps forward and 1 or 3 steps back? First, we're going to start with another poll. We're going to keep this to like 2 or 3 minutes. This one is a text box short answer. Go ahead and go back to Slido at the website or using the QR code. What are the risks that you associate with AI implementation and use in general? But I'm also particularly curious on your team or organization or department. So go ahead and drop in any thoughts that you have here. Data spillage, bad info. Who is getting all my information? Yep. Data security, cat phishing, environment privacy accuracy. Yep. Starting to see a bunch of themes here. Gonna give it say 1 more minute. Yeah. Okay. So the themes here. I'm gonna wrap this up because we're hitting the big points here. Data, who gets access to that data? What happens if the data leaks? What am I doing to the world by engaging with this technology at all? How do we mitigate quality? All important things, all really central to this piece of the puzzle. There's a lot of good stuff here, but I'm gonna move us on. So the bad news is all of those questions are exactly the right ones, even though they are the precise questions that we have been asking for the past, what, 3, 4 years since this technology first emerged in the mainstream. How do you prevent data leakage? How do you balance the value you're getting from the costs or trade-offs? The good news is there are a few guardrails that this is not, the Ten Commandments written in stone, but think about these more as ways to frame your own thinking as you encounter situations point by point. The first thing, and the way to address a lot of this is don't trust AI too much. There is a huge common theme that is very much supported by the AI companies, by Anthropic, by ChatGPT, by Google, to anthropomorphize these tools. They think, right? They are speaking to you. The whole concept of AGI, which I'm not even going to touch today, right? They are trying to anthropomorphize these technologies to make it seem more human because that makes people trust it more. But they're not human. They are plausibility machines giving you an answer that it thinks that you want to hear. So you cannot trust it, even though it's like, think about this as an intern, right? This ain't an intern. It's a tool, right? So you, at the end of the day, are responsible for the outputs of of any technology, right? Um, so some common things that you should always make sure to do: fact check the reports and the sources that it gives you. Quality check the materials that you put together, and don't outsource your strategic brain to it. The idea is to free up your time and space so you can think strategically, not do the strategic thinking for you. Most importantly, across all things, keep a human in the loop, right? You need to have a person that is evaluating data that is put together, analysis, drafts. There is no such thing as, oh, it's not my fault. This is an AI output. You are responsible for the outputs of your technology. The next is to mitigate bias. Again, these are plausibility machines, which means they are based on the data that you give them. And guess what? That data was generated by humans, and humans are biased. And so if you have bias in the input, there is going to be bias in the output. People are imperfect, and so are the technologies, right? So you must always think critically in an output. Who is being represented in this and who is not? Something as simple as create a social media post about my candidate that appeals to college students, right? A college student for a candidate in the Boston area might be very different than a candidate who is trying to speak to college students at Texas A&M, for example. It is a very different set of interests, of priorities, of goals, and objective. They are all specific, and you need to think about who you're speaking with and what are the assumptions that you're making. That is the best way to mitigate bias, is to be intentional. Also, as you get into more complex things, make sure that you are bringing the communities that you're trying to reach into your decision-making process. That is just as true as, generative AI related programming as it is to anything else in your campaign or organization. It ain't that deep. Finally, you should try to represent when and how AI is used. This is a complex, constantly moving target. Do you need to note somewhere that you use generative AI to write the first draft of your social media post? I would say no. But on the opposite extreme, if you are contacting voters by text and you're using a large language model to do it, AI to do it, that's something that you should disclose because you are representing that AI is representing your campaign, which means that you are responsible for it. And making people think that they're talking to a person when they're actually talking to a machine, that to me is pretty obviously bad news. Most answers to this exist in a gray area, and you're going to need to navigate it case by case and organization by organization. But that is why, as we'll get to in a moment, it is so important to have clear AI usage policies and guidelines for your organization. Set those bounds around what is not permissible and set very clear advice around what is permissible. But before we get to that, let's talk about cybersecurity. I'm going to like move quickly past this because I think there's a bunch of stuff in the Q&A, and also I already covered the most important pieces. Being extraordinarily careful and intentional about the nature of the data that you give. If there is no need to give personally identifiable information to a system, don't do it. And if you absolutely have to do it, make sure that you are using a system that your organization is paying for and that you have turned off. You let use my data to train models. Turned that off in the settings. Absolutely essential. Also, like any system, multi-factor authentication is key. Access control and permissions is key. The same as setting up email or anything like that. There is a really excellent, I think that there's a screenshot of this further down, but Defending Digital Campaigns put together a really, really good toolkit for ways to think through this at that link. Please click it. It is one of the most useful resources on this entire thing. In my opinion, the most important thing you can do related to privacy and security is to create an AI use policy for your organization. Probably the majority of folks here are not in a position to do that on behalf of their organization or even their team. That's okay. But someone at your organization does need to do that. And your job, if you don't have that authority, is to pressure folks, is to push them to prioritize putting together an AI usage policy. There is a concept called shadow AI, which is where it's not clear what's allowed and what's not in your organization for AI. So people can start doing it on the side on their personal accounts. And there is really nothing worse that people can be doing. Not only is it unclear, you are massively elevating the risk of exposure of data, of reputational risk for your organization or your candidate. But I think the most important thing about an AI use policy, like it's not going to be that complex. It just means that you're being intentional about it. It means someone at your organization has sat down and thought through what does it mean for this technology to be useful. And what am I comfortable with and what am I not? How does this reflect my values as an organization? And how do I want to support my team in being as effective and efficient as possible? The good news is that on both the cybersecurity front and the usage policy front, the Defending Digital Campaigns put together this AI toolkit, which is really, really good. I just read it right before this call. It has two sections. One is best broad plus. There's a lot of different sections here, but broadly it falls into cybersecurity best practices, the obvious stuff. And the second piece is it has a really, really solid template for putting together a usage policy for your organization. Or both fill in the blank components and the sorts of questions that you need to do. Really extremely valuable. If there is one thing that you can make happen for your organization that is going to be maximally useful related to AI. It's not coming up with a great workflow. It's not vibe coding an app. It is making sure that there is a solid, clear usage policy that sets very clear red lines on what you cannot do, but encourages folks to explore and develop within the clearly defined sort of green zone of things that are permissible. Again, it's going to differ from organization to organization, but the main stuff, make sure you're not putting PII, make sure you're using a company account, things of that nature. That's going to be generally pretty common across. So the bottom line, as we've been talking about, this is iterative. It is so much gray area. It is constantly evolving. We talked about how AI has evolved since 24 at the beginning with the advent of reasoning models and agentic AI and stuff like that. Who knows how much it's going to change by the end of the year, let alone 2028, right? But the best thing that we can do is not wait for it to be perfect, but to work with the resources that we have on hand. There's the cards you're dealt, and there's how you play the hand. We've been dealt a really interesting hand, and you figure out how to play it. With that, now that we've talked about some of the risks, and again, I think there's a bunch of stuff in the Q&A that we'll dig in deeper. Let's talk about the opportunities. And I'm not here to like shill for AI. I think that there are places that it's useful. But I think the nature of that utility is kind of interesting and sort of a special concept to think about. A lot of what we've been talking about so far has been grounded in efficiency, right? What are the workflows that take up a bunch of your time? What of that can be automated? Um, Stuff like that. But with anything, including AI, as you get more efficient, the end goal of efficiency is not perfect efficiency where you've taken a task from 10 hours down to 10 minutes. The value beyond that is once you get to a certain amount of efficiency, new things become possible that weren't before. And here I like to think about the concept of campaign to-do list, right? There are, if you're working on a campaign, I'm sure about 6 million things that, are on the I should do this at some point list, right? Um, Most of the stuff at the very top of the list is where we spend our time, the hair on fire stuff. We all know there's a bunch of stuff at the bottom of the list that, oh, I would love to do it, but I'm never gonna get to this, right? But there's a whole bunch of stuff in the middle of your to-do list that would be genuinely meaningful to your organization if only you had the time to actually do it, but who the hell has that time? That's the place that I see AI as most helpful. It is saving you time at the top of your to-do list so you can do the deep strategic thinking on the things that are going to make not only your life easier and quicker, but actually better. Make your organization run smoother, more accessibly, more collaboratively. Things like off the top of my head, being able to translate um, outreach materials into different languages with the human in the loop, with someone who actually speaks that language, actually reviewing the outputs. Or say, wouldn't it be great if every campaign had really solid volunteer onboarding materials? If only you have a few hours to put that together, you can actually use this technology to put together pretty solid first draft onboarding materials, right? Um, that's the sort of thing that simply wasn't possible before when we all have our hair on fire. But there is a ton of power that is unlocked if we actually free some of that up. So with that, I want to bring us back into the breakouts and allow us to sort of like dream and vision together here. We spent some time talking about efficiencies. That's really cool. I want us to start with that same point of like what is taking the most time and say, if I could solve this, some of these are well suited to AI, what could I do? And not what could I do with AI necessarily, that could be a piece of it, but what is the middle of my to do list that would be meaningfully beneficial to my campaign, to my organization, to our long term thinking, that like maybe now I can finally start thinking about. So I believe we are going to break back into the breakout groups. Jess, I'm going to hand that to you to make that happen and say how long we actually have here.
Yeah, so we're going to have about 15 minutes for this second conversation so we can have plenty of time for the Q&A afterwards. This is on page 6 of your handout, so it is the last page of your handout if you'd like to reference it, and you're welcome to go back into the same breakout rooms, or if you want to meet new people, you can go into different ones. And I believe that we are ready to open the breakout rooms now.
Yes.
Myra.
They're
Okay.
actually set to move you back to the rooms that you were already in. So if you need to open your breakout room panel, you can switch from there. All right. See y'all soon.
Welcome back.
All right. Yeah, welcome everybody. Uh, Deborah or Jess, how long do you think we should spend on this debrief before we move into takeaways and Q&A?
I think we have a very healthy Q&A, so I think maybe like 5 minutes, and then we can spend the rest of the time Q&A.
Cool. All right, let's debrief. Anybody, please feel free to raise your hand or jump on mic. What came up? What were the themes? What did you discover about yourselves and your souls in this conversation that is sort of big picture?
You can also drop in the chat shout outs to folks that you talked with, and please feel free, raise your hand to share something that you think the rest of us should hear that you talked about in your room.
I could share real quick that in our room for EDs, it seemed like there's kind of a challenge in that with the technology moving so quickly, that leadership is trying to learn about, IT is trying to learn about, everyone's trying to learn about. So it's hard to create protocols for this thing that's moving so fast that makes sense for broad organizations. And so, like, trying to nail that down and then moving down from that spot is like a real thing that we're trying to figure out.
Yeah, that is like the problem. And it's really, really tough, especially because it's changing all the time. The main piece of advice that I would give is start by identifying problems that need to be solved. Not, I said this earlier, but like, it's not AI is cool. What can we throw it at? It's what are the problems that I am already facing that make my life harder, that take time, that keep me from engaging with voters more, for example, or are confusing my team. And of the problems you identify, and I'm sure there are plenty, then and only then, the question is what of those problems, which of those is AI well suited to solve? And then you can go from there to like, okay, what does the solution actually look like? How do we know it's successful? Who needs to buy in? Things like that. But like, AI ain't the point. Solving problems that make your organization run more collaboratively, more transparently, more efficiently, more effectively, that's the point. And AI it can solve a particular set of problems there. So if you identify some of those things, you can begin to build a policy around those things, right? Like, what are the evergreen, like, in doing this set of things, what's always going to be true, even if AI got twice as good tomorrow? One of them, again, is probably like use the paid version, not the free version. Um, Another is like define clearly who is giving sign off approval on this sort of thing, right? Stuff like that. Um, we're almost out of time, but let's do one more. Christy, I'm gonna call on you. You mentioned really cool ideas, and I would love to hear you share a couple of them.
Um, yeah, so most of us were digital communicators in our group. And so some of the things that we have been doing to use them, I mentioned that I get sent, a ton of clips of video and I have to figure out how to make a story out of them. So I might have like 200 minutes of video and I've been running those and they're very generic video. They're like of an event or whatever. And I just run those through and just say, give me some key moments. And then sometimes I even have them, it tell me where to clip the video, just so that I know where my time stops are, things like that. Other people talked about just looking at like their social media metrics, running metrics from like all their content and like what did well, what didn't do well. So just some of those like tasks that you have to do over and over again. Sometimes you have to like create a document for someone. And I said earlier that I screenshot just like the report you get on your dashboard and Instagram. I just screenshot those and threw them into AI and it created the report for me with outlines, bigger text, small text, graphs, and it was amazing. So that's what I did.
Yeah. That's a really good one. And yeah, a couple of things to flag. One, it sounds like there is a specific tool for what you're describing, which is cool and makes sense. And there's always going to be a question of like, how is this saving me time? What's the value there? Can I get the campaign to pay for it? Things like that. There is also, it sounds like you're describing using it as like getting the thought started. I really like the idea of like, you could do again like sort of a 20 questions sort of thing with the system. You could say I have 200 minutes of a parade right? Ask me questions to help me figure out how I structure this into a narrative. And then it can be like, were there any big moments, right? Like, what was the cause of the of the parade? Do you have any clips that like really highlight that, right? What's the structure of this? Are you trying to identify a problem? Or are you trying to have like an uplifting kind of vibe, right? These are things I'm coming up with off the top of my head, right? That sort of thing can be really powerful. With that, it does look like we do indeed have quite a robust Q&A. So Jess, do you want to move us? Oh, wait, I have key takeaways that I have to do before we move there. This is going to be, I think, pretty clear here, folks. The bottom line is the things to remember if you come away with this. One, AI is powerful, can be effective. One does not mean the other. To bridge that gap, you must be intentional. You must know the problem you're trying to solve and which of those problems AI is suited to assist with. Got to iterate. It's going to get better the more detail, the more context you provide. You I really cannot emphasize enough. The most important thing is a clear usage policy for your organization. Don't run off and do AI stuff yourself with your own private thing. Don't let this sit until the last minute. Have a usage policy. And we're only at the beginning. It's the beginning of a very weird, scary, opaque future, but we are at the beginning of it, which means that we have way more power to affect it than the next person who has our jobs will have, and even the version of ourselves a year from now will have. So, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is today. Let's go plant that tree. With that, we will actually move into the Q&A. Thank you, everybody. I really do hope that the pieces where I talked at you for almost 2 hours were helpful. Let's dive in. Jess, should I just start running, or do you want to read stuff out?
It's up to you. Do you know how to sort them by most upvotes?
I sure do.
Okay, cool. And while
Okay.
we're doing that, y'all, please go into the Q&A, make sure your questions are in there, read the ones that already are, and give us a little thumbs up, upvote the ones that you'd like us to answer first. And we can start with Ambrosia's.
Yeah, Ambrosia. Yeah, Ambrosia asks, what should we not use AI for? Connecting it to your calendar and everything else seems dangerous. That is a really good question, Ambrosia. And there's a couple of places my brain goes here. So one, it all comes back to the idea that AI is a plausibility machine. It is giving you what is known as probabilistic answers, what is likely to be the case, rather than deterministic answers, the sort of thing you would get from a calculator. So if you got something where it absolutely must be 100% right every single time in a very specific way, that's not a good use. The other most important one is you should be using AI to allow people to do what people are best at, not replace them. So, one, you should not use AI to replace staff. You should absolutely, I'm opinionated here, but you should absolutely not use AI as the primary point of conversation or contact between your campaign and your voters or constituents. That's what people are for. A campaign. The point of a campaign is for people to choose their elected representative. So if you are, outsourcing that interaction to a machine, in my opinion, you're sort of missing the whole point. And even if you are, you should absolutely positively disclose when you are. There are absolutely good uses of AI, even in voter contact. There was a really good example of, I think it was a union which used a chatbot to gather personal stories related to healthcare access, and things like that. And there was a back and forth rather than a form, got some incredibly powerful stories and was able to extract some really meaningful stuff. Really compelling. Or doing follow up to, RSVP attendees. Hey, I'm, the Democratic Party of Georgia's automated assistant. Looks like you RSVP'd. Just want to make sure that you know where you're going. Any questions you might have, stuff like that. So big, broad question. But the bottom line is you should not use it for things that people are best at, and you should not use it to replace people. Next, I see Shell. Apologies if I'm mispronouncing your name. Can you talk about work within a project so it remembers things? Yeah, bottom line, all of the major tools, Claude by Anthropic, ChatGPT by OpenAI, Gemini by Google, all have things that are called projects or something similar, which is essentially sort of like a Google Drive structure for a chatbot, especially when you're working with Teams. It lets you sort of like organize different prompts or questions or the data that is used to inform all of that stuff. And it has a common set of context and information to work with. This is definitely a valuable thing because it's sort of like the next logical step of my usage policy idea, right? If you have a clear set of things you can or can't do, you should also have a clear set of data that you can and can't use. So a great thing to do might be setting up Claude or ChatGPT or Gemini or whatever for everyone in your organization that you want access to it, and then set up a set of projects, of folders that are like, this is the finance related stuff that you can ask. This is the comms related stuff. And if it's in there, you can use it. It was put there by your department lead. If it's not, don't, or at least ask. So that's the concept for project. The environmental impacts, moving on, Nadia asked, what are the environmental impacts of using AI and how can we mitigate it? I liked my prompt results, but felt guilty a minute later. Yeah, this is probably one of the biggest ethical questions that we have as like progressives, and is of course something that we're all going to struggle with. There are a couple of components here. One, you should know that just like the vast majority of pollution is done by companies, and while individual recycling is really, really small, or is helpful, its effect is really, really small. The environmental impact of large language models, generative AI, that is something that mostly is about companies using it at industrial scale. I actually checked the environmental cost, the carbon cost of my organization, Social Current, using large language models at high volume throughout a year. The carbon impact of that could be offset by planting one single tree. Okay, so the marginal cost of you using this technology is really small, but that's not a good enough answer. It's like more about like bigger picture. What are we doing and is it the right thing? And for that, I really believe the question is about intention. So the example that I think about a lot is, say you are canvassing in rural Southwest Pennsylvania. I'm in Pittsburgh right now. For an environmental cause. Okay, out here, folks are spaced out. You're probably driving from house to house or town to town, right? That means you are probably getting in a car, burning oil, and putting CO2 in the atmosphere to go travel to canvass people on a cause that is about taking carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. Does that mean you shouldn't canvass? Absolutely not. It means that you need to be aware of the trade-offs and whether it's worth it. I would say most of us in this call would say it is worth it to go, spend a tank of gas canvassing and organizing people if it's going to like help block fracking or help get, restorative justice for a polluted creek, stuff like that. The same thing is true with AI. Are you using it for fun or are you using it for impact? That's where it really comes down to for environmental stuff for me, and a lot of the broader ethical questions as well. Let's see. Moving on, someone asked, is ChatGPT an agent model? What are some agent models? Should we use agent models or just the chat reasoning models? So the long story short, an agent model, or rather, agency is not a model, it is a use, okay? So you can take ChatGPT or Claude or any of the others, and making it agentic is basically giving it tools to go do stuff, not just giving text as an output, but for example, to connect to your calendar or to go read a website. Or to write code for you. It means that the output is more than just what it is saying. It means it is using tools generally. So all of the current modern American frontier models have agentic stuff. Whether you should use it is a question for your organization and your usage policy. What you do need to know is that more complex things you are asking an agent to build, the more failure modes there are. So the more oversight and checking you need to have. Also, there is a serious cost, both literal and figurative, to being like, oh, I am just going to have it go build a bunch of stuff, right? That costs a lot of tokens, a lot of usage, and you will be shocked at how quickly you can burn through your allotment. Shocked. So a very big question. Let's see. Using local open models for privacy. Is anyone using local open models for privacy concerns? Yeah, local models can be valuable, especially for privacy related stuff. Generally speaking, the most advanced open model, especially one you can host locally on your machine, is going to be worse, have lower quality outputs than ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, things of that nature. It also, you can solve most of the privacy problems for those models by using enterprise business subscription for those models. That said, that can get really expensive. Say you want to parse thousands and thousands and thousands of individual pieces of text for something, right? That's going to be damn expensive on Claude. But if it's a simple task, it's free if you're doing it on your machine, right? There's so much. I can go so much deeper, but I'm going to just try to burn through as many of these as I can. How can you be certain with AI giving you factual or fake information? Jeff says you can't, you have to test it. That is the correct answer. You can mitigate by providing lots of context, by making sure that you are giving a good data source for it to rely on, by establishing good grounds for validating or double checking. But no, again, large language models, generative AI is a plausibility machine. That is its greatest power because it means it is incredibly broad in the amount of things that it can do. It also means that it is never going to be perfectly reliable, and it is least reliable in the places where you may need it most. For example, say you have questions about like demographics of your specific district. If that information is not clearly available somewhere accessible online or in a data set you give it, the odds of hallucination go way, way up. Okay. So that's the quick answer to that question. Moving on. I'm going to refresh most upvotes. Ambrosia's back. Oh,
Just
go
as
ahead,
a
Jess.
quick, I have to break in. Sorry. We have a survey for you that we would love for you to take, a feedback survey. So as we continue with Q&A, please do the feedback survey. We're going to drop it in the chat and I will let Ben continue, but do the survey.
I'm going to answer this last question, and then I think we'll be at time. I'm going to start answering this question, but the other piece is about more trainings on AI. So that seems like a very nice opportunity to hand it to you, Jess. Ambrosia asks, does anywhere offer more in-depth training or classes on how to use AI and what not to use it with? And various examples in here. The long story short is yes, and Jess may have thoughts here. The one thing that I will flag is that Higher Ground Labs is making a lot of investments of the literal and figurative in generative AI, and they host regular two things. One, brown bag sessions where people just share cool stuff that they are doing with this technology and the solutions. Another thing that they run occasionally is I think they call it Claude Code study halls, which is they let everybody get together and they like everybody chats live on projects that they're working on together. So if you're looking for opportunities to hear use cases, best practices, connect with others answering these questions in the space, Higher Ground Labs has a couple of good resources, and I encourage you to check that out. Jess, do you want to bring us home and flag any other trainings, classes, stuff like that to dig into?
We are about to be at time, so I will once again encourage you to do the feedback survey, and I will let you know that I dropped in a resource from Higher Ground Labs. Our friends have put together a massive resource that if you would like to dig in more, you can check this out, and then that feedback survey is a great place to let us know how did this hit for you? How did this content land? Are there things you wish that we had covered, but we ran out of time? Are there places that you want to dig in more? What do you want to see programming wise? Please let us know. And we are very grateful to you for spending a few hours of your day with us. And Ben, we are very grateful to you for your expertise and your willingness to spend your time as a new parent with us here today. So just very appreciative. And y'all let us give it up in the chat for Ben Resnick. And that is our show.
Thanks so much, y'all. I hope that this was helpful. We could keep doing this for like 10 more hours, but I do hope there was something that y'all could take out of this. And looking forward to all the cool stuff that y'all going to explore with this technology this cycle.
Thanks. Okay, I think we can